a dog barking frantically in front of the school bus. The driver, uneasy and hesitant, was ready to ignore it, until something in the dog's desperate eyes made him stop. Little did he know that choice would stir memories long buried and change his life in ways he never expected. The sun was just starting to rise over the Texas horizon when Liam Wilson settled into the driver's seat of the yellow school bus. It was a quiet morning, and the familiar hum of the engine beneath him felt comforting in its own way. The bus slowly filled with excited children chatting and laughing. His job was simple: get them to school safely and without delay. The bus creaked as the last few students hopped on, their backpacks bouncing as they scrambled to find their seats. Liam glanced at them as he checked his mirrors, ready to pull out of the parking lot. It was another day, just like every other. But as his hand hovered over the gear shift, something caught his eye: a small, wiry figure darting toward the bus. A Jack Russell Terrier. The dog yapped incessantly, its high-pitched barks echoing against the metal sides of the bus. Liam clenched his jaw. He didn't have time for this, and frankly, he didn't care, shifting the bus into gear, fully intending to drive away and ignore the situation. Yet, the barking grew louder and more frantic, cutting through the laughter of the kids in the back. Liam's hands tightened on the steering wheel as irritation flared up inside him. He hated dogs. He had made that decision a long time ago, and this little creature was no different. His body tensed, and an unwelcome memory began to surface, dragging him back to a time he had tried so hard to forget. It was a sweltering summer day, and Liam was just 4 years old. His parents had surprised him with a Jack Russell puppy they named Max. Max wasn't just a dog to Liam, he was his best friend. The two were inseparable, spending every waking moment together. Liam had learned from his parents that dogs were loyal, smart, and always there for you, no matter what. For years that had been true. Max was everything Liam had ever wanted in a companion. But that all changed one fateful afternoon when they got lost in the woods behind their home. Liam, then a frightened young boy, had clung to Max for comfort, hoping his faithful dog would lead him home. Max had sniffed the air, seemingly calm, before suddenly darting off into the trees, leaving Liam alone and terrified. He waited, crying and calling out for hours, but Max never came back. When Liam was found by his parents, cold and shaken, all he could think about was how Max had abandoned him. The hurt of that day never faded. In Liam's mind, Max hadn't been the loyal, trustworthy companion he'd believed in. Instead, the dog had left him behind when he needed him most. Liam never forgave him. From that moment on, he promised himself he would never trust a dog again. The shrill barks from outside the bus snapped Liam back to the present. His pulse quickened with irritation. He didn't want to deal with another dog, especially not now. His past had taught him that they weren't loyal, at least not to him. Liam's foot hovered over the gas pedal, ready to drive off, when a small voice piped up from behind him. "Mr. Wilson, can't we help the dog?" Liam glanced in the rearview mirror. A little girl with pigtails was staring at him with wide, pleading eyes. Before he could respond, another child chimed in, followed by several more. "It looks like it needs help. Please, Mr. Wilson, just see what's wrong." The chorus of young voices made Liam grit his teeth. He could feel the weight of their hopeful stares pressing on him, and part of him wanted to just drive away, put the dog and his memories behind him. But the children's faces, filled with concern and innocence, made him hesitate. Liam exhaled slowly. He didn't care about the dog. Not really. But these kids, they believed in something. Against his better judgment, Liam pulled the parking brake and opened the bus door. All right," he grumbled, stepping down onto the pavement. The dog stopped barking, its brown eyes locking onto his as if it understood Liam's reluctance. Despite himself, he couldn't help but notice how calm the little terrier suddenly became, as though it knew it had finally gotten his attention. "Let's see what you're trying to show me, then," Liam muttered, his voice low. The dog, as the children quickly named him, wagged its tail in response, turning to lead the way. He followed the dog. Bonnie, the name on the collar, led him off the road and down a small, overgrown path that curved behind some trees. Every few feet, Bonnie would stop, glance back to make sure Liam was still following, then continue on with purpose. Liam could feel the frustration rising in him. He wasn't supposed to leave the bus. He had a job to do, and this wasn't part of it. But then, after just a few minutes of walking, Bonnie stopped. Liam squinted ahead and felt a sharp jolt of panic grip him. There, lying on the ground, was a small girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Her tiny frame curled up as if she had simply collapsed where she stood. Her hair was matted against her forehead, her little hands limp by her sides. "Oh, God," Liam muttered as he rushed over, his heart pounding. He knelt beside the girl, checking for any sign of movement. Her face was pale, her lips dry, and she was so still it sent a wave of dread through him. Bonnie circled around her, nudging her gently with his nose, as if trying to wake her up. Liam's training as a school bus driver included basic first aid, and right now he was grateful for it. He quickly checked her pulse, weak, but there. Her breathing was shallow. "Hey! Hey!" he called softly, giving her shoulder a gentle shake. "Can you hear me?" No response. His mind raced, but he remembered the basics. He needed to keep her stable until help arrived. He fumbled for his phone and called 911, explaining the situation with as much calm as he could muster. "A little girl. She's unconscious. Looks like she's fainted. I think she might be dehydrated or starving." The dispatcher assured him help was on the way, but as Liam knelt there, he couldn't shake the sense of urgency in his chest. The sun was beating down hard, and the girl's skin felt clammy. Bonnie sat quietly beside her, the little body pressed against her legs, almost as if the dog was guarding her. "Don't worry, help is coming," Liam murmured, mostly to himself as he placed his jacket under her head. He kept checking her pulse, trying to keep her stable, his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Minutes passed, but it felt like an eternity. Finally, he heard the distant wail of the ambulance sirens. Relief flooded through him as the paramedics arrived, quickly assessing the girl and loading her onto a stretcher. Liam stepped back, his legs feeling unsteady. He had done what he could, but he couldn't shake the worry. One of the paramedics turned to him. "Good call. She was severely dehydrated and likely hasn't eaten in a while. She's lucky someone found her when they did." Liam nodded, still trying to process everything that had just happened. As they lifted the stretcher into the ambulance, Bonnie jumped up as if wanting to follow. Liam instinctively reached out and caught the little dog in his arms. The dog gave a soft whimper, watching as the ambulance sped away, leaving a trail of dust behind it. Liam let out a long breath, turning to walk back to the bus. His duty wasn't over yet. The kids were still waiting for him, and he knew he was already way behind schedule. He had to get them to school. When he got back on the bus, the children were buzzing with questions, but Liam didn't say much. "Everything's all right," he muttered, turning the key in the ignition. The bus roared back to life, and they were off, the world moving forward as if nothing had happened. Liam could feel the weight of this morning's events as he drove the school bus into the parking lot. As soon as the bus came to a halt, Liam barely had time to step out before the familiar stern voice cut through the air. "Wilson!" Principal David called from the entrance of the school, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. His eyes narrowed as Liam approached. "You're late. Again." Liam knew what was coming. He had rehearsed his explanation in his head all the way back, but under David's piercing glare, the words felt heavier. He cleared his throat and began, "There was a little girl. She fainted. I couldn't just leave her." David didn't seem impressed. His lips tightened into a thin line, his expression cold and unforgiving. "Parents have been calling all morning, furious about your delay. They trust you to get their kids to school on time, not play hero on the side of the road." He paused for a moment, glancing at his watch, then back at Liam. "This isn't the first time you've been careless." Liam's chest tightened. "It wasn't about being a hero," he said, his voice strained. "That little girl could have been seriously hurt if I hadn't stopped." David's eyes flickered with something close to annoyance. "That's not the point, Wilson. You've been unreliable before. This was the last straw." His words landed like a punch to the gut. "You're done here." Liam blinked, stunned for a moment. He had expected a scolding, maybe even a formal warning, but not this. "Wait, what? You're firing me?" David didn't flinch. "Effective immediately. I'll notify the district." Liam stood frozen, the world suddenly feeling like it was spinning off its axis. His job, his livelihood, gone. He had tried to do the right thing, but it had cost him everything. He wanted to argue, to explain again, but he knew it wouldn't change anything. David had made up his mind long before this incident. Without another word, Liam turned and walked away, his steps heavy as the reality of his situation began to settle in. The sun was harsh, glaring down on him as if mocking his failure. By the time he reached his car, his shoulders slumped under the weight of his own disappointment. He was fired, all for trying to help a little girl and her dog. The drive home was a blur. Thoughts swirled in his head, but none of them made sense. He had no plan, no idea what came next. And then, as he rounded a quiet corner just outside of town, Liam saw something that made his heart skip a beat. There, by the side of the road, lay the small Bonnie. But now the dog looked defeated, its head resting on its paws, body curled in on itself. For a moment, Liam wasn't sure what to do. He didn't like dogs, he never had, but something about the way the little terrier perked up as it spotted him stirred something in his chest. The dog's tail gave a hesitant wag, its eyes brightening as Liam stepped out of the car. "Hey, buddy," Liam muttered, crouching down as the dog scrambled to its feet. It was the first time he'd seen the dog calm, not barking or jumping. Bonnie moved closer, pressing its small body against Liam's leg as if seeking comfort. "What are you doing out here?" Liam asked, feeling a strange mix of confusion and concern. The dog looked up at him, eyes wide and pleading, as if trying to tell him something important. Bonnie's head turned toward the direction of the hospital, and he let out a soft whine. Liam hesitated, but the dog's persistent gaze didn't waver. It was strange, unnerving almost, but for the second time that day, Liam felt a pull, like there was something he couldn't quite ignore. Bonnie wanted him to follow. With a deep sigh, Liam stood up. "Okay, I got it. You want to go to the hospital to visit your little lady, right? Let's go," he muttered. As he walked, the little dog trotted happily beside him, tail wagging. Through the quiet streets, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that, just maybe, this strange encounter wasn't over yet. At the hospital, Liam found Lucia awake in her bed, a soft smile spreading across her pale face when she saw Bonnie enter the room. "Bonnie!" Lucia exclaimed, reaching out her arms as the little dog jumped onto the bed, nuzzling into her lap. There was an undeniable bond between the two, one that Liam couldn't ignore. It was as if Bonnie had been waiting for this very moment, knowing that Lucia needed her. "She really loves you," Liam said awkwardly, not sure how to start the conversation. He wasn't great at small talk, especially not with kids, but he couldn't deny the relief he felt seeing Lucia awake. Lucia nodded, her hand stroking Bonnie's fur softly. "She's my best friend," the girl whispered, glancing up at Liam. "I don't know what I'd do without her." Liam shifted uncomfortably, not sure where this was going, but then Lucia's expression darkened, and she continued in a quieter voice. "My Uncle Jack. He doesn't want me to have her." Liam furrowed his brow, confused. "Why wouldn't he want you to keep your own dog?" Lucia looked down, the sadness in her eyes deepening. "Jack, my uncle. He runs a dog breeding farm," she explained slowly. "He breeds all kinds of dogs to sell, but he doesn't have a license. He only keeps the ones that look healthy and strong, the ones that are sick or weak. Her voice caught in her throat, and she looked away. Liam swallowed hard. "What does he do with them?" "He throws them away," Lucia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just like he did with Bonnie." Liam's chest tightened as Lucia told him the full story. A little over a year ago, Bonnie had been one of those dogs. Born smaller and weaker than the others, she had been deemed worthless by Jack. He had thrown her into a trash bin thinking no one would notice. But Lucia had noticed. "I found her in the garbage," Lucia said, her voice trembling. "She was so small, so scared. I couldn't leave her there. I took her home and hid her. I've been taking care of her ever since, but Jack found out a few days ago. He got mad and said he was going to get rid of her for good this time. I couldn't let that happen, so I ran away." Liam listened, his stomach twisting as he realized the gravity of the situation. Lucia had been wandering the streets with Bonnie when she'd collapsed from hunger and exhaustion. She'd been so desperate to save her dog that she risked her own health. "I don't know what to do," Lucia continued, tears filling her eyes. "Please help me. I can't go back to Jack's farm. Bonnie and the other dogs, they don't deserve to be treated like that." Liam felt something stir deep within him. He'd spent years hating dogs, avoiding them, pushing them away because of one bad experience. But now, standing here in the hospital room with this brave little girl and her loyal dog, something shifted. Bonnie, the dog he once saw as an annoyance, had proven herself more than once today. She'd saved Lucia's life. And now, as Lucia told her heartbreaking story, Liam felt the walls around his heart beginning to crumble. He took a deep breath, looking from Bonnie to Lucia. "I'm not exactly a dog person," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "But I can't just ignore this." Lucia's eyes widened with hope. "You'll help us?" Liam nodded, surprising even himself. "Yeah, I'll help." Bonnie let out a soft bark, as if she understood. At that moment, Liam realized that maybe, just maybe, dogs weren't as bad as he'd always thought. In the evening, Liam sat quietly on his worn-out couch, staring at the little dog curled up by his feet. He had only agreed to take her home for the night, just until Lucia was feeling better. Bonnie had saved Lucia's life. Her desperate barks outside the school bus weren't random or meaningless. They were filled with urgency, with a deep, instinctual understanding that someone needed help. That same dog was now lying at Liam's feet, as if she trusted him completely. The thought stirred something in him. He'd always seen dogs as trouble, as unpredictable animals that brought back painful memories. But Bonnie was different. The next morning, Liam was jolted by a knock on the door. His mother had decided to pay him an unexpected visit. She appeared with a warm smile on her face. As she stepped inside, her eyes immediately fell on Bonnie, who was now standing at attention, her little tail wagging excitedly. "Liam," his mother whispered, her voice cracking. "You have a dog?" Liam's stomach tightened. He hadn't had a dog since Max. It was an unspoken rule between him and his mother. Dogs were never to be mentioned in their household. But, to his surprise, his mother's eyes weren't filled with the same apprehension he expected. Instead, they welled with tears. "What's wrong, Mom?" Liam asked, concerned about lacing his voice. "Are you okay?" His mother took a deep breath, sitting down on the couch next to him. She reached out, gently stroking Bonnie's head, her hand trembling slightly. "Liam," she began, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "There's something I never told you about Max." Liam frowned, unsure of where this was going. "What do you mean?" "When you and Max got lost in the woods all those years ago, it was Max who saved you," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "You passed out from exhaustion and Max ran for help. He found a search party and led them back to you. By the time they found you, Max was—" She stopped, tears spilling down her cheeks. Max had collapsed from exhaustion. He didn't survive. I never told you because I didn't want you to bear the pain of losing him. I thought it would be too much for you. Liam's heart dropped. All these years he had blamed the dog, blamed Max for everything that had gone wrong. He had carried that resentment with him for so long it had clouded his memories. And now the truth was crashing down on him like a tidal wave. "I didn't tell you because I thought it would be too much for you to handle," his mother continued, her voice breaking. "I didn't want you to carry the guilt, but now, seeing you with this dog, it feels like it's time you knew." Liam sat there, stunned, his chest tightening with regret. Max had been a hero, just like Bonnie had been for Lucia. And he had spent all these years hating dogs, shutting himself off from the possibility that they could be more than just animals. They could be loyal, selfless, even life-savers. After his mother left, Liam couldn't shake the feeling of sorrow and guilt that washed over him. He stared at Bonnie, who was now resting her head on his lap, as if sensing the weight on his heart. For the first time in years, Liam allowed himself to feel the loss of Max fully, without the anger and resentment that had shielded him for so long. The next few days with Bonnie were unexpectedly comforting. Liam found himself talking to her as though she could understand every word. When he looked into her eyes, there was something familiar, something that reminded him of Max. The way Bonnie stuck by his side, the way she seemed to sense his emotions. It was almost as if Max had returned to him in this new form, to heal the wounds he hadn't even known were still open. "Maybe you were sent to find me again," Liam whispered one night, stroking Bonnie's soft fur. The dog looked up at him, her eyes filled with a warmth that seemed to mirror his own feelings. And in that moment, Liam knew his perspective on dogs had changed forever. Bonnie had opened a door inside him that he had slammed shut years ago. One afternoon, Liam visited Lucia in the hospital. The little girl's face lit up when she saw Bonnie, and the dog immediately ran to her, jumping onto the bed and licking her hand. "I missed you, Bonnie," Lucia giggled, hugging the dog tightly. But her smile quickly faded as she looked up at Liam. "I don't want to go back to Mr. Jack's house." Liam frowned, kneeling beside her. "Why not, Lucia?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "My parents are in Egypt. They work at the American Embassy, and I can't live with them for a few more years. But Jack, he's not nice to the dogs. I don't want to go back there. Please, Liam. Help me save them." Her words struck Liam deeply. He had heard rumors about Jack's farm, but to hear it from Lucia, with such raw fear and desperation in her voice, made it real. He couldn't just walk away from this. That night, as he sat with Bonnie curled up beside him, Liam made a decision. He needed to do something. The next morning, Liam reached out to Zoe, a well-known volunteer coordinator at the local animal shelter. Zoe was passionate about animals, especially dogs, and had led several successful campaigns to shut down unethical breeders and puppy mills. "Zoe, it's Liam Wilson," he said when she answered the phone. "I need your help. I want to be part of your next campaign to help the dogs. There's a place that needs to be shut down." It was a crisp autumn morning when Liam parked his truck outside the hospital, Bonnie sitting attentively in the passenger seat. Today was the day Lucia was finally being discharged, and both he and Bonnie were here to pick her up. Bonnie, as usual, was wagging her tail enthusiastically. Her ears perked up as she stared out the window, as if sensing this was a special day. Liam patted her head, smiling. "Ready to see Lucia, girl?" The hospital doors slid open, and there she was, Lucia, 6 years old, looking stronger than ever. Her face lit up when she saw Liam and Bonnie waiting for her. Without hesitation, she ran to the truck, throwing her arms around Bonnie in a tight hug. "Bonnie!" Lucia exclaimed, her voice full of joy. Liam helped Lucia into the truck, and soon they were on their way back home. The drive was quiet, peaceful, until they came across a scene that made Liam's heart skip a beat. A few blocks ahead, traffic was slowing down. As they drew closer, Liam saw it. An overturned van on the side of the road, the back doors wide open. He could make out several small figures scrambling across the asphalt. Puppies, dozens of them, frightened and confused. "Liam, look!" Lucia pointed from the back seat, her eyes wide. "The puppies!" Liam pulled the truck to a stop. People were already gathering around, but the situation was chaotic. Some of the puppies were injured, others were running toward the road in panic. Bonnie barked, sensing the distress. Liam's instincts kicked in. He knew they had to help. "Stay close to me, Lucia," he said firmly as they climbed out of the truck. "And Bonnie, let's see if we can help calm them down." Bonnie dashed ahead, her movements quick but purposeful. Somehow she understood exactly what needed to be done. She herded the frightened puppies away from the road, circling them with gentle nudges, guiding them back towards safety. Lucia watched in awe, her small hands covering her mouth. "She's amazing." Liam smiled despite the urgency of the moment. "Yeah, she is." They worked quickly. Liam and Bonnie managed to gather the puppies, while Lucia comforted the ones that were too scared to move. Soon, paramedics arrived, followed by volunteers from the local animal shelter where Liam had been spending more and more of his time. One of the shelter volunteers, it's Zoe, rushed over to them. "Liam, I can't believe it's you. We need all the help we can get." The shelter's emergency crew began setting up makeshift crates, and with Bonnie's help, Liam and Lucia assisted in guiding the injured and scared dogs into the safety of the crates. Lucia noticed a familiar logo on the side of the overturned van: Jack's Puppy Breeding Facility. Her heart sank. These poor animals had come from his facility, born and raised in horrible conditions. As the scene calmed down and the media arrived, it wasn't long before cameras started focusing on Bonnie, the hero dog, and little Lucia. A reporter stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Sir, we've heard you were one of the first to respond. Can you tell us what happened?" Liam hesitated, but then felt a tug on his sleeve. Lucia, with her big eyes looking up at him, whispered, "You have to tell them, Liam. You have to tell them about the bad place." Taking a deep breath, Liam nodded. He looked into the camera, then down at the rescued puppies and began to speak. These dogs, they didn't just come from anywhere. They came from a place that treats them like objects, not living beings. Jack's breeding facility isn't licensed. I've seen firsthand what goes on there. The words poured out, and as they did, Liam felt a weight lift off his shoulders. It was time people knew the truth. The media quickly picked up the story, and by the next day, Liam's face, along with Bonnie and Lucia, was all over the local news. They were hailed as heroes, especially Bonnie, whose quick thinking and loyalty had saved so many lives. The shelter where Liam volunteered saw an overwhelming response, with donations pouring in to help expand their rescue efforts. Liam was walking home late one evening. When he rounded the corner near the old farm, Jack suddenly appeared. The older man's face was twisted in anger, his fists clenched as he stormed toward Liam. "I told you to stop snooping around, Wilson," Jack growled. Before Liam could respond, Jack threw a punch, knocking him off balance. "You think you can just walk into my life and destroy my business?" Liam stumbled, his body hitting the ground hard. Pain shot through his ribs as Jack kicked him, the words mixing with the sounds of his own labored breathing. He tried to get up, but Jack was relentless, shoving him back down. "What do you think you're doing?" came a small but determined voice. Liam looked up to see Lucia standing a few feet away, her little body trembling, but her eyes filled with a mix of fear and fierce determination. She was holding onto Bonnie's leash, and the dog was growling low, her eyes never leaving Jack. "Get out of here, kid!" Jack spat, turning toward Lucia, but Bonnie, sensing the threat, sprang into action. The small dog lunged at Jack, barking ferociously, sinking her teeth into his pant leg. Jack cursed and tried to shake her off, but Bonnie wouldn't let go. In the chaos, Jack dropped his phone. It hit the pavement with a clatter, and Lucia didn't hesitate. She rushed forward and grabbed it. Jack, now distracted by Bonnie, didn't even notice. "Bonnie, come here!" Lucia shouted, pulling the dog back just as Jack finally managed to shake her loose. "You're gonna regret this, kid," Jack yelled, but he didn't make another move. His face was flushed with rage, but something in his eyes showed hesitation. Without another word, he turned and stalked off into the night, his footsteps heavy and angry on the quiet street. Liam slowly pulled himself up, wincing from the pain in his side. He looked down at Lucia, who was clutching Jack's phone tightly in her small hands. "Are you okay, Mr. Liam?" she asked softly, her eyes wide with worry. Liam nodded, still catching his breath. "Yeah, I'm okay." He looked at her, then at Bonnie, who was wagging her tail now, her earlier aggression fading. "You two saved me. Both of you." Lucia smiled shyly, but it quickly turned serious as she held out the phone. Jack dropped this. Liam's heart skipped a beat. "Let's take it to the police," he said, already feeling a glimmer of hope amidst the pain. With this, they could finally prove what Jack had been doing. Together, Liam and Lucia headed straight to the police station. Inside Jack's phone were text messages, pictures, and videos, clear evidence of his illegal activities and his network of buyers. It was exactly what they needed. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Liam launched a full-scale campaign against animal cruelty, using the evidence they'd gathered to not only bring attention to Jack's breeding farm, but also to target other unethical breeders across the state. The campaign gained traction quickly, spreading across social media, picking up support from animal rights groups and local communities. Despite Jack's threats and the challenges they faced, Liam didn't back down. Eventually, the authorities could no longer ignore the evidence. Jack's breeding farm was shut down, and he, along with his associates, were arrested for animal cruelty, unlicensed breeding, and various other charges. The victory felt sweet, hard-earned, but deserved. It had been exactly a year since the day he met Bonnie and little Lucia, and his life had transformed in ways he never thought possible. Today, they were here to celebrate something that once seemed unimaginable, a brand new, state-of-the-art animal shelter, built with the help of the community and a project that Liam had poured his heart into. Lucia stood next to Bonnie, her small hand resting gently on the dog's soft fur. The two of them had been inseparable since the day Bonnie led Liam to Lucia, lying unconscious from hunger. Bonnie had saved her that day, but in a way, she had also saved Liam. Standing on the stage, Liam's gaze shifted to the little girl and her loyal dog. For the past year, they had lived together while waiting for Lucia's parents from Egypt. Liam had grown to love them like family. He knew that one day they would have to say goodbye. But for now, they were a team, a family forged through shared experiences, trust, and the unconditional love of a small, brave dog. As the audience quieted, Liam took a deep breath and began his speech. "A year ago," he started, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I was just a school bus driver, focused on my routine and not much else. I never imagined that one simple act, stopping to follow a dog, would lead me here, standing in front of all of you." Lucia smiled up at him, her eyes bright with pride. Bonnie wagged her tail, seeming to sense the importance of the moment. "This shelter," Liam continued, "isn't just a place for animals to find safety. It's a reminder that kindness, no matter how small, can change lives. Bonnie taught me that. She didn't just save Lucia that day, she opened my eyes to a world I'd been ignoring, a world where every creature deserves love, care, and a chance." The crowd nodded in agreement, and Liam saw familiar faces, volunteers from the shelter, people who had adopted rescued animals, and neighbors who had supported their mission. The shelter had grown from a small, overworked space to a fully equipped facility, capable of helping more animals than ever before. "As we stand here today," Liam said, "I want to thank each and every one of you. None of this would have been possible without your support. Together, we've shown that when a community comes together, we can make a real difference, for the animals and for each other." Lucia clapped her small hands and the crowd followed suit. Liam smiled down at her, feeling a sense of fulfillment he had never known. The sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the new shelter. As Liam stepped down from the stage, Lucia ran up to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "You did great!" she exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. Bonnie barked, as if in agreement, and Liam chuckled, ruffling the dog's ears. "Thanks, kiddo," he said, bending down to give her a hug. For the rest of the evening, the shelter buzzed with activity. Families walked through the new kennels, meeting dogs and cats looking for homes. Volunteers chatted excitedly about the future, and Liam, Lucia, and Bonnie stood together, watching it all unfold, knowing that their journey had only just begun. And that, my friends, is how one little dog named Bonnie changed not just one life, but an entire community. From saving Lucia to inspiring Liam to find his true calling, Bonnie's loyalty and bravery remind us that sometimes the smallest actions can lead to the biggest changes. Whether it's rescuing an animal in need or simply being there for someone, kindness can have a ripple effect we never expected. And hey, if you've got a Bonnie in your life, drop a comment below and tell us how they've made a difference. We'd love to hear your stories. Thanks for watching, and remember, kindness always comes back around, just like Bonnie did. See you in the next video.